Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about ARPANET, the precursor of the internet and the web, the World Wide Web, and the proposal for the World Wide Web, which was a revolutionary set of technologies that built on top of the internet. First, let's talk about the ARPANET in 1971. ARPANET is the precursor of the internet, and it was the project funded by the United States Department of Defense, essentially the Army, and worked on by various uh, scientists in the United States, although, of course, using technologies that were developed by other scientists in England and France. And but the ARPANET was the main project that led to the development of the internet. And by 1971 and to the mid 1970s, let's recall that computers were being used in various kinds of organizations, research organizations, and also industrial organizations. But although computers were now largely present in various government, private sector, military organizations, the computers were not connected to each other. You could not send a file from one computer to another. Email didn't exist. There was no infrastructure to connect computers to each other. Even in organizations, I think there may have been some developments in intra-network connections, but what about sending the file from your computer in one building to another building that is not connected to each other? So, part of the revolutionary aspect of the internet was to connect all the computers and the personal computers or office or desktop kind of computers that were being developed. By 1971, not those personal computers as we see, like the Macintosh and the first IBMs, but already in that direction. So the ARPANET project was this idea to be able to connect computers across a network of communication. So the network of communication also had to be built along with the protocols and rules for sending signals over the communication infrastructure. But if you think about it, before 1971, there was already a communication infrastructure of telephones, wired communication infrastructure. Wireless comes later, but we had the wired communication infrastructure, and that was based on the technology of circuit switching. Circuit switching, which was the analog, more electric based technology of the telephone communication infrastructure. And developing at this time was the packet switching technology, which better translated or enabled the creation of an infrastructure that translated the electric signals, but then translated them to binary and to data packets that spoke the more directly the language, the binary language of computers. Here we have a map of the computers that were connected to this newly developed system of the ARPANET. So we have UCLA, USCB, other kinds of universities, other kind of organizations, largely research and academic organizations. And in this state of the ARPANET, computers were then finally, or for the first time, able to communicate with each other via their own computer system. Telephone lines had existed for quite a while now, and telegraphy had existed as well, but digital computers were not connected to each other. And at this time, they were able to connect to each other and send files among the computers that were connected in the ARPANET. This was also the year that Janis Joplin released her album Pearl, but that's just an aside, and I'm not sure if it's totally related with the development of the internet. Now jump to the 1980s. Computers were being farther developed. They're getting more sophisticated. They have a screen with a user interface. They have keyboards. They have diskettes. They are spread around our organizations. The ARPANET is developing they call it the backbone of universities and entities connected to it that are able to use the system, the ARPANET, to send data from one entity to another. But there was still at this time no way for one organization. So maybe let's go back to actually one of the previous slides. So for example, there is people here in Utah. They are working on they have their own computers. They are working on some data, processing some data, and they want to communicate with people here in Purdue. Well, for Utah to communicate with Purdue, they may need to send some kind of signal to Purdue indicating that they want to start a connection. And Purdue has to reply and say, yes, I will accept your connection, or I will accept the data transfer that you're sending. And then Utah will send maybe a piece of data, maybe email. I think email was around here at this stage of the ARPANET development. And then Purdue would receive the email, would read it, and then maybe send back the request of the data that they wanted or that they were requested for. But at this stage, there was no way for people in Utah, for example, to just go on their computer and search all the documents that maybe Purdue had regarding that industrial system that they were developing. And Purdue also could not just go to the Rutgers website and look for all their documents regarding the work that they were doing. They had to initiate a direct communication with Rutgers and say, hey, Rutgers, can you just send me those documents that are about this and so on? And Rutgers would have to reply and say, yes, let me get those documents and prepare them and then send them to you. So they could communicate in that sense, but there were no web pages to communicate, no way for one entity to easily access and see the documents that another entity may have. Pop quiz. Who developed the ARPANET project that became the internet? Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Harvard, MIT, and JP Morgan Chase. Scientists working for the US Department of Defense, none of the above. As we kind of just mentioned, the answer here is D, right? Scientists working for the US Department of Defense. But what I wanted to get into is that although we had the internet in the beginning, there was no system with which to openly browse the documents that one organization may have had. And there was no system for these documents to link to each other. So you can iteratively go through various documents by using the now famous hyperlinks of the web. And so this individual here, almost single-handedly, Tim Berners-Lee, made this information management proposal of 1989, which I can share with you and you can look for it online. And in it, he proposed the development of a linked system for storing and accessing documents. The documents would also have references to other documents in the network via this hyperlink, what they call the hyperlink. And today we usually just call link for short. And this web technology would enable documents to be openly available to others and include hyperlinks that direct particular pieces of the information to other related information. So as we saw here before, this is actually one of the, we actually have a GUI of one of the early graphic user interface of one of the early browsers for the web, the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web was the system that ran on top of the internet and enabled documents, what we call web pages or websites, to be accessed and have these hyperlinks that link to other related web pages and websites. And in the sense, of course, there is a better way to manage the information, to manage the data. And that's part of the rationale for why Tim Berners-Lee developed the World Wide Web. And by 1994, the World Wide Web was becoming more public, and search engines were being developed to search for all the documents that were available on the web, and then enable people to actually find those documents like we do now via the Google search engine. And that's the example of the information management proposal that I wanted to share with you to begin this course and our conversations on information management. See you next time.